All right. Well, Idaho is lucky to have him once again. March 29th, Tristan Mcdonald will return to the Mountain America Center, and we are so much so looking forward to it that we decided to have a quick conversation with him as well. Tristan, how you doing, my man?
Good, good. How are you doing, Blake?
Doing wonderful, man. I'm so excited to be talking to you. First of all, you're coming off. I didn't realize that you were a personal trainer on top of everything else that you do. You're always active. You're always in the gym. Sometimes it's at a GEMA, but also sometimes it's at Voss, as we see.
Yeah. It's just the life, man. It's just the life. No, I love it though. It is. It's a really fulfilling job. A lot of times people come in and, especially when they're looking to work with a personal trainer, you can tell that they really want to make a difference in their life and in their health. And it's just really fulfilling to be able to kind of help someone achieve that. And, they're the one doing all the work, but just helping people, kind of feel better about themselves. So it's a really fulfilling job. I love it, man. I mean, I live to train. So it's just, I get to do what I love, man. So I got no complaints.
How long have you been a personal trainer for?
Oh man. So I used to do some personal training when I had lived in St. George, but it was kind of more like independent. And now, oh man, how long have I even lived up here? It's pretty much as soon as we had moved up to the like Pleasant Grove. Gosh, I think I got a job at Vasa shortly after moving up here. So I want to say I've been doing it for like, I don't even know, like 7, 8 months now.
Very
I want
cool.
to say I'd have
Yeah.
to check, but I love it, man. It's a really fulfilling job. Honestly, I have no complaints about it whatsoever. So
I was going to get into this later, but is that one of the reasons why you're the strength and conditioning coach at Agema as well? I know you run a class there doing that.
yeah. So yeah, no, they just kind of asked me to come in and work with some of the guys. And I mean all the guys training at a game are studs and whatnot. So they just kind of asked me to come in and work with them and whatnot. And they're already such great athletes. It's like putting them through like a workout routine, just kind of finding out like what each athlete's individual goal is, like whether it's losing weight or working on what like you would call absolute strength, or maybe it's even putting on muscle mass, like doing a little hypertrophic work. It's pretty easy. I won't lie. You just go in and they're ready to freaking get after it, man. So, but I love it. Like exercise science has always been something that has like really fascinated me. And actually, originally when we had first moved up to the area, prior to me getting a job at Vasa, I was actually going to try and get my PhD in exercise science. I've always wanted to. It's like I feel like I've come this far, gotten my master's degree and whatnot. I just feel like it would be so cool from an academic standpoint, as well as an athletic standpoint, to get a PhD in exercise science. Because I use it all the time. You know what I mean? Like that's what I do. So. Um, yeah, so just a little bit about myself, I guess.
That I know you have a handful of degrees, obviously already have a master's, you were looking to potentially get your PhD. Have you always had this studious approach, not only to this classroom, but also in the gym? Obviously, you've been successful in the world of wrestling, jujitsu, obviously MMA now is a new venture as well.
Yeah, no. So honestly, so really what kind of started it was, so when I had first walked on at Iowa, I knew I was going to be there for as long as I could. And my academic advisor at the time was like, hey, like if you do a couple more classes, you could actually probably get like a business degree as well. So that's kind of how I ended up getting a double major in undergrad. So my primary degree was health and human physiology, and then I specialized in exercise science. And then I actually also ended up getting a degree in business enterprise leadership. And so it was kind of one of those things, where it was like, well, like if I'm going to be here and they're going to take my money, like I might as well get as much as I can from it. So I ended up doing that. And then, um, so we had like a little bit of a gap year or some time where we had went back to Wisconsin. And long story short, my dad is a disabled veteran and whatnot. And so, like I said, long story short, there was pretty much just a situation where I was able to, get a master's degree, and a lot of the tuition would be covered because of my dad being a disabled veteran, and kind of using his benefits and whatnot. So I was like, well, gosh, like, I mean, if the opportunity is there, why not take it? You know what I mean? So yeah, that's how I ended up going. And I got a master's of science in sports leadership, and that was an extremely fascinating degree. We looked a lot of into the psychology of an athlete. In fact, like my actual master's like thesis or dissertation was literally titled "How to Create an Optimal Training Environment for an Athlete to Thrive in." And so it just looked at a bunch of different factors like environmental factors, psychological factors. And there was just so much stuff in that degree that was like, wow, like this is what was happening at Iowa. Like just so much stuff that I wish I would have known, like when I was an athlete at the University of Iowa. But now it's awesome to know now because, I obviously use it for myself. I try to share my knowledge with a lot of other athletes and whatnot, and just try to help people out. I'm just big on that, man. I feel like if I can help people out, why not? Honestly.
What is some of the data that you found for an athlete to perform optimally versus maybe a fighter who falls flat on fight night?
Yeah. So, man, there's there's so much stuff I could get into. So one thing that I always found that was extremely fascinating was so there's primarily two types of training environments. Okay. So when you walk into like a gym, whatever it is, it could be a gym. I mean, it technically could even be like a classroom, but we'll just make it about athletes. So let's say you walk into a gym. There's two type of training environments. There's a mastery oriented environment and there's a performance oriented environment. So if you walk into a gym and let's say like it's sparring day, right? And if all that the athletes care about is just winning, right? Like by any means necessary, they're going hard as heck. They're, trying to knock each other's socks off and whatnot. And it's really just the main goal is about coming out on top in the practice room. That would be considered a performance oriented environment. And there's a lot of research behind performance oriented environments and how they affect an athlete like at a psychological level. Like the rate of burnout is going to be a lot higher in a performance oriented environment as opposed to like a mastery oriented environment. And essentially, to make it simple, a mastery oriented environment is coming into a training room and the number one goal, the number one objective above all else is skill acquisition. So essentially just getting better, right? So, imagine like you go into a gym and, sometimes like a game is not like this, thank goodness, but it is pretty common for a lot of MMA gyms. You guys come in, they have an ego, and it's really, really easy for that that environment to kind of be more performance oriented, and you're just trying to come in and almost survive. You're right, you're just trying to win by any means necessary. So there's not a lot of trying new stuff, there's not a lot of growth, or I should say not as much growth as there could be if we were like in an optimal environment such as a mastery environment. So imagine you go into a gym and two guys are sparring, and at the end of the sparring session, they still obviously go hard and whatnot, but at the end they're like, oh man, really good job. One thing that I could say is, you got to keep your left hand up a little bit more. And they're just giving each other kind of this, what they would call formative feedback. And there's actually research on formative feedback being a really effective intervention strategy to help optimize skill acquisition. And so essentially, I mean, to make it simple, it's really just kind of going into a gym and making sure that that environment and the students within that environment know that, hey, we can go hard here, whether it's grappling, wrestling, stand up, striking, it doesn't matter, but at the end of the day we are just trying to make each other better. So there was so much fascinating stuff like that, because that's one thing UW is known for, is they are huge on evidence-based research. If there is like a theory, if there's not evidence to support that theory, they don't even mess with it. So, I mean, I could go, I don't want to go on a rant, but I could go on and on about it. But that was probably something that was extremely fascinating to me that I thought was very relatable to, MMA gyms and whatnot. Right. Cause I mean, man, I mean, you're in the field too. It's very easy for especially combat sport athletes to kind of develop like an ego, and they just want to win and they don't really want to help other people out. And, that's where the saying iron sharpen irons comes from. You know what I mean? Like if you're going with a guy and every single week you're tuning him up and he's not getting any better, you're not helping him or giving him feedback or trying to help him improve. How is he going to grow and be able to help you improve? You see what I'm saying? So that's where kind of the iron sharpen iron saying really comes into effect. But that's just one of the many, many things that I learned at Iowa, or I'm sorry, at UW in my master's program.
Were there any specific case studies that you were able to research, or was it already done research that you more so studied up on and learned?
Yeah, it was more research that was already done and that I had kind of studied up on and learned. But there was so many different aspects that we had looked at. Like one thing that we had looked at was youth sports. And that was a really, really interesting unit to go through youth sports. In fact, like the first page or so of my master's thesis was talking about something it's relatable for adults as well, but especially for youth. It's called the self-determination theory of motivation. And so essentially what it looks at is it's I believe it was developed by a French psychologist. You'll have to fact check me on that one. But essentially, there's three main components that an individual needs, youth or adult, for them to be able to foster like intrinsic motivation, which is the most powerful form of motivation, right? And so essentially those three different things are going to be relatedness, which is feeling like you're a part of a social group, right? So when you come in, like you feel like you're a fighter, you feel like you're a part of a group, right? You have your teammates and whatnot. You feel like you're a part of a social group, essentially. The second would be mastery, which is essentially like feeling uh having the feeling that you feel good or that you are good at what you do, right? Because I mean, imagine like a youth kid goes into wrestling practice every single week and he's just getting the snot beat. You know what I mean? He's getting the snot beat out of him left and right. Probably not going to want to do it for much longer, right? And then the last is going to be autonomy, and this is the one that had a really big effect on youth specifically, is essentially having some sort of say in what you do. And I don't mean that in the sense of like, a student's going to come in or an athlete's going to come in and they're going to be calling the shots on what they do, but at least they have some form of control over what they do. So this is where it's big. There's another concept that has a lot of research behind it called student voice, or you could use athlete voice as well. And it's essentially just making sure that you have a type of relationship with your athlete where they can come in and they can be honest with you and say, oh man, like, I'm just not feeling good. And then you can ask things like, okay, well, how much sleep did you get last night? Did you eat before you came in for training? And so that was like the self-determination theory of motivation was a really big aspect when it came to youth sports specifically, because I mean, think about it. How many kids get a say in what they do, right? It's just their parents and they're just the parents, they pick them up, they tell them they're going to practice and all that. But it definitely applies for adults as well. I mean, imagine you go into a gym and maybe you have some autonomy over what you do. You feel like you're good at what you do, but maybe you don't feel like you're a part of the team, or maybe you don't really feel like you're a part of the gym. Like your relationship with the other athletes just isn't where you want it to be. That can definitely have a psychological effect on you. So yeah, sorry to go on another rant, but
No, this is great. I love hearing all about this. It makes me curious, you being a competitive athlete still, does this make you, all this research, all this knowledge that you have, make you want to someday become more so of a coach? I know you're already a personal trainer, but
yeah.
does that make you also want to extend your athletic career? What is kind of the goals in terms of the future plans for you?
Yeah, so the future plans. So personally, I have two main goals athletically, and those two goals are one to win ADCC. I would like to win ADCC, and then the other one is to make it into the UFC and become a UFC world champ. Those are really the two main goals for me. So, going off of your question, I do definitely have plans to be a coach one day. And people will like sometimes the other students like at a game will call me coach and stuff. I'll be honest, there's times where I don't really feel like a coach, but that's just because like and I'll even say to them sometimes too, like I'm in this journey too with you guys. Like I'm still learning jujitsu technique. I mean, gosh, like I'm a purple belt and there's times I feel like a freaking white belt when I pull guard, you know what I mean? So like I'm still on the journey with you guys. So I definitely do want to be play more of a heavy cultural one day, but as of right now, I am very determined to reach my goals athletically. Um, And so I think maybe later on, like my wife right now, she's in medical school, so that was kind of a big reason why I had gotten a job. I mean, we've lived that life of us both being in school and living off loans, and it just it's just it can be stressful. So I thought that that was fair for me to get this job at Vasa and whatnot while she kind of wrapped up residency and or not residency what do they call it, clinicals and rotations and all that stuff. But academically, I would definitely one day like to get my PhD. I feel like I've come this far and I just love it. Like I feel like it's just more knowledge, you know what I mean? Like I don't want to go on a rant here, but I feel like as a coach it is your obligation to know the science and to know the research, right? Because I mean, listen, dude, this ain't 1971 Rocky One anymore, man. Like we know how to train the human body. We know how to optimize our workouts and we know how to optimize our training environment. And so I really think it's on the coaches. Like it is your job to know that research and to try to put your athletes or your students in the best position possible for them to be successful.
You've had some of the best coaches in the entire state in your corner over the years. Obviously, I think of back in the day when you were at Fusion MMA with Aaron Reese. You've
Oh
got
yeah.
Dana Ristazabal, Court McGee, who's taken you under your wing as well.
Yeah.
What's it been like being able to learn from some of the best that this state has?
Oh God, I'm blessed. There's just no other way to say it. I'm just incredibly blessed. It was really funny because when I found out that Cassandra had got accepted into uh essentially it was Rocky Vista Medical University. And when I found out that we were going to St. George, Utah, I won't even lie, man. I was like devastated. I was like, what am I going to do in freaking Utah? Like, I was like, where am I going to train? Like, how am I supposed to accomplish my goals? And so there was a part of me that was like almost devastated because it was between Utah and Colorado, I think is where their other main campus is. And so obviously, Colorado has a ton of gyms and stuff. So I could have made something work over there. But honestly, I really do believe it was all part of God's plan. I believe that He had a reason for having us be sent to Utah. And I mean, having, like you said, Aaron Reese, I mean, just a phenomenal coach, just an amazing coach and even a better man. And then, he was obviously the one who recommended me because it was kind of tricky because I was like, well, where can I go to a gym that still has like high level MMA as well as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Because I obviously love to, I love to compete in like the ADCC Opens and, I want to win it one day. So I was like, where can I go that has the best of both worlds? And Aaron was like, hands down, a Agema, not even close. So I came there and like Court and Dane were just, because, like we talked about, right? Like earlier, it can be like intimidating walking into a new gym. I swear, like sometimes with these ears too, man, like it's like a curse. Like you walk into a gym with cauliflower ear and people are like, oh yeah, like this guy, yeah, he wants to go hard, and they just, it can be an intimidating thing. And I remember when I first walked into a Agema and I was like all nervous and I'm like, oh gosh, like I'm gonna have to freaking fight for my life to prove myself here. Like they were so chill. Like they were so awesome. Court was so inviting. Dane was so inviting. I mean, they've just all been amazing. Court, Amy, Dane, just I've just been blessed, man. There's really no other way to say it. I genuinely could not ask for a better, kind of come up into my MMA career than with what I've had. It's just been a true blessing.
This last fight in November was your first fight with them. Obviously, it didn't go your way, but what were some of the lessons you think you learned with your first time being at Agema, representing their gym and also competing on a big stage?
Yeah, so I'm really huge on that. That was another big thing that we had learned in the master's program was just always having a growth mindset, and growth mindset, it almost kind of sounds like a little cliche, a little cheesy, but really the biggest thing that you're taking away from like that concept of having a growth mindset is your perception on things, right? Because I mean, don't get me wrong, like I'll be the first person to say I hate losing. I hate losing. There's nothing that I dislike more than losing. But what can I take away from that? And that's what I wanted to try to do was okay. What can I take away from this last fight? And I think one of the biggest things that I took away from that was, um, I wonder if this is the right, excuse me, the right word to use, is almost like my mentality about how I fight. So like in my last fight, I was very like, what's he gonna do? Like, what's his game plan? What's he gonna do? I was really focused on him, and I think it kind of made me a little bit more defensive, if that makes sense. Like, I wasn't as aggressive as I think I should have been, and so going into this next fight, obviously, like, I think it's smart. One, always have respect for your opponents. Never underestimate your opponent. Your next fight's always your biggest fight. But I'm definitely not going to be as focused on what he's doing. I know my game plan, and it doesn't matter if it's on the feet, if we're up against the cage, or we're on the ground. I'm just going to do what I know I can do best.
Did you feel like you weren't necessarily yourself in that November walk, given that you were thinking more about what Ole was going to do versus what your plans were to do?
Yeah, 100%. I think I was too focused on my opponent and what his game plan was. And it was funny too, because I pretty much had it like backwards. Like, I don't know why, but I thought he was gonna try to wrestle a lot more, and his stand up, and I mean, props to him. I mean, his stand up was beautiful. It really was. I mean, he had phenomenal stand up, and that was another really big takeaway. And it's something that I've always known I need to improve on, is just my stand up altogether. Um, so yeah, I would agree with you 100%, Blake. I think I was too focused on my opponent, and even my close friends that had watched the fight, they had even noted that I just wasn't as aggressive, or as offensive as I probably should have been, especially on the feet, especially on the feet.
Have you been able to look into Austin Barisha a little bit, and what do you take away from him?
Honestly, I haven't really. So I Court has kind of been the one that's been, looking into him and whatnot. Once again, like, I always respect my opponents. You know, I probably wouldn't be good at talking smack, honestly. Like, I'm always going to have respect for my opponents. I mean, they're a warrior too. Anyone who steps into that cage, I have the utmost respect for. But to be frank, I really don't care. It just doesn't matter. I mean, if I'm not winning the stand up game, I know what I need to do. And it really doesn't matter whether it's stand up, whether it's on the ground, whether it's wrestling, whether it's up against the cage. I'm just going to find a way to win.
That brings up such a good point, Tristan. You are, I would say, one of the nicest guys in the entire MMA world in this
Yeah,
state that we have.
probably too nice, man. Too nice.
But you are also a vicious competitor at the same time. You have been competing at an extremely high level for years, at stages higher than, let's call a spade, more than most of anybody else here in this state. I wonder, how are you able to flip that switch personally when it is kind of something that you do have to turn on and off?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I, I would honestly say, you know, that's a really good question. I don't even know how to explain it. I guess I just, it's go time. Like, it's go time. Like, when I'm ready to compete, like, when it's time, obviously, like, I have respect for my opponents and whatnot, but when it's time to go, I don't know. I guess I just enter like a different state of mind, I guess you could say. Um, and it becomes a lot more serious. And one thing that I have worked on personally is not making it like too serious, because I think that was a big problem I used to have in the past. Was I would get like so riled up about competing. Like, it would be like, it's life or death. You know what I mean? Like, if I lose, I'm the worst. And it just really negative self-talk. And that's kind of the nice thing, is like, with a new perspective, obviously, like, I'm never planning on losing, but I always just kind of tell myself, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Win or lose, it's going to be all right. It's going to be okay. Like, I'm going to walk out of here. Um, and if God forbid I lose, I'm still gonna walk away with stuff that I know I can constantly improve on. And that's a big thing too. Like, I'll tell, some of the other guys, like some of the jujitsu competitors at Agima, is, when we have these local tournaments and whatnot, what does it matter? You know what I mean? Especially like these smaller local tournaments. If you go out there and you lose every match, oh, okay. If you go out, if it's a grappling industries, and you go out, you have 4 matches, and you lose all 4 matches. Well, now we have 4 matches worth of material and feedback, critical feedback that we can use to improve our game. And then the next time we're out there, and maybe it's a bigger tournament, that's when it really matters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I think just kind of like telling myself like it's gonna be okay. I kind of like calm my nerves a little bit, but I'm still able to kind of flip that switch and tell myself like, all right, like it's go time. We can be nice right after this bell rings, but up until then, like I'm ready to bang. Let's go.
Have you always had this growth mindset, or is that something that you acquired over time?
No, definitely something I acquired over time. I used to kind of be almost not the opposite, but kind of the opposite. Like I used to, like I was saying earlier, I used to have a very like it was the end of the world if I lost. You know what I mean? Like it was do or die. Like this is your moment. Everything is riding on this. And I feel like I would put so much pressure on myself to a point where it was really detrimental. And so definitely the growth mindset and just like my the lens of which I view it are different now as opposed to when I was younger. I mean, especially when I was like in high school and I first started wrestling, like I was just I was like the complete opposite. Like I was like, if you're not working hard, you're a piece of crap, and don't be if you're not working hard, don't be surprised when you lose. And it was like, if you lose, you suck. You must not have worked hard enough. And now I just have more more of a laid back approach. So no, I definitely had to develop that growth mindset over time.
How did you react to the Ole loss? Was it more so frustration and kind of expelling that out and feeling those things, or was it more so, okay, time to build back up, time to improve the striking like you talked about and all of
Yeah, so initially after the loss, I mean, yeah, I was pissed. Like, yeah, initially after, yeah, I mean, yeah, no, no, there's, I think, and I think that's normal and that's healthy to a degree. Yeah, like that drive in you, that fire in you, like, yeah, there's a little, I mean, in my opinion, there should be a little part of you that's like upset about it. Yeah, like I mean, it's not good to lose, it's not fun to lose. So initially, yeah, I was pissed off, but then it was just, what do I got to do? Because that's the other thing too, is I knew Oleg was I knew he was very experienced. Like I knew he wasn't going to be a slouch by any means. And so since I knew I was going up against a stud and unfortunately I had lost, it was like, you know, right after that, I was pretty much already talking to court about like what do I got to do different? Like what am I doing wrong? Where can I improve? What do I have to work on? And I think we definitely have. I feel like I definitely have improved in my stand up. And I think another big concept of that improvement is going to be merging my stand up and my grappling together, because there was quite a while where I would kind of separate the two, and it's like, okay, like I'm doing stand up or I'm grappling. And hey, there's a reason they call it mixed martial arts. You know what I mean? So in this next fight, I really want to make sure that I'm not just tunnel vision on okay, I need to wrestle him or I need to stand up, wrestle him or strike. Um so yeah, I think in this next fight, I definitely, want to be more fluid in that sense, if that makes sense.
first fight was quite different than the second fight. First fight was a quick first round finish. Obviously, the second fight was a long, drawn out 9 minute war.
Yeah.
How much did you learn from the debut versus the second fight? And in terms of which one are you almost more grateful for in the grand scheme of things?
Honestly, probably the loss. I mean, one, it's just always humbling, like it's humbling in the sense that you know there's always stuff you have to work on, and that's why I love competition. Like I freaking love to compete, man. I love competing, and that's a big reason why, is because you're always going to learn something from it. And they say all the time you learn more from your losses versus your wins, and that really is true in that respect, because after that loss, it was just, what do I have to do? What do I got to do? And that's the other thing too, is I feel like, I mean, at least for me personally, um a win is awesome, and I'm always grateful for a win. But when I lose, it's like the first thing that comes to my head is like, what do I got to do different? Where do I have to improve? What am I doing wrong? Like, do I have to close the distance? Do I have to circle more? Do I have to throw more strikes? Do I need to mix it up, like my stand up and my wrestling? Um, so I definitely was more grateful for the loss, and I did learn a ton in between. I think one thing that probably didn't help me was just the gap in between the fights, and no excuses. I mean, I should have freaking figured it out and won the fight, but there was like, gosh, I don't even know, over a year in between my first fight and my second fight, and I do think that does play a role because I mean, it kind of sort of felt like my first fight all over again in a weird way, I guess. I mean, I obviously had the experience from the first fight, walking out and whatnot, but I definitely would like to fight more consistently and more frequently. I don't want to have another big gap like that again.
Do you feel like you have something to prove on April 11th?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
Do you care to expound on that at all, or do you mind to keep those cards a little bit closer to yourself?
I just honestly, the biggest thing that I want to prove is it just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where the fight goes. It doesn't matter if it's on the feet, if it's on the cage, if it's on the ground, if we're wrestling. It does not matter. If I don't win in the striking, I'm going to win in the grappling. If I don't win in the grappling, I'm going to win in the striking. And if I can't win in either one, I'm going to mix them both together and I'm going to win either way. If there's a will, there's a way. And I definitely have a fucking will. Or I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that.
No, don't worry
sorry,
about it.
sorry
All
about that.
good. Is there a difference in your state of mind going into a jiu-jitsu competition versus an MMA bout? Or how do you handle those nerves and compartmentalize those two things? Because they're very different.
Yeah, no, so they are different in that aspect. The nerves are definitely I feel like it's the same in the sense of like nerves and whatnot. Like I still have the same routine. Like, I always want to remain composed and whatnot. And when I go out there, I want to make sure I'm, methodical. I don't want to go out and just start swinging for the fields and stuff like that. But um, I wouldn't say there's a huge difference. Like, I mean, when I was, at the trials, like, I mean, I was, day two of the trials, I was still as nervous as I, as I probably was for this fight. But the only thing that's really different is, um, maybe just like a few different principles. Like obviously, like, if it hits the ground, like in MMA, like the principle of space and separation, like you have to make sure you're closing that off, staying as tight as possible. Um, whereas in jiu-jitsu, obviously, like you don't have to worry about strikes and whatnot. But my routine, I would say, is pretty much the same. And I treat it doesn't matter if it's a jiu-jitsu match or if it's an MMA fight. I treat them all the same in the manner of preparation and being serious. So
He is one of the most tenured competitors that the entire state of Utah has to offer. He's making the walk once again away from home in Idaho Falls, but we're so much so looking forward to seeing him. Tristan Mcdonald, tickets are on sale right now, fiercefightingchampionship.com. Thank you so much for the time, Tristan. Really appreciate
thank
it.
you so much, Blake. I appreciate it, brother. Thank you, man.